All right, so Brendan Schaub and Bryan Callen just did their 1,000th episode of The Fighter and the Kid, and they had on some of their favorite guests throughout the years to celebrate, but you tell there's some comedians missing that I'm sure Brendan wanted to have on, like Theo. I mean, that dude left and never looked back. He couldn't even do a 10-minute Zoom call for them. And then also Bobby Lee, but we all know the situation there, which they actually talked about towards the end of the podcast because they're kind of going over all the shit that happened within the past 5 years and how some comedians stopped associating with them, mostly because of Bryan getting canceled. Like, they talked a lot about that, and it was after they had on their guests, so they're probably like, yeah, this is why some people don't want to talk to us anymore. And Brendan sounds kind of pissed about some of the people that turned their back on them.
I didn't realize that it would kind of, how many friends we'd lose in the comedy community, like how many friends we would lose. And for a long time, I was very upset at that. And now, we've gotten through it. Now I'm glad that happened because now we know what we're dealing with. We know who we can bank on, who we can't, all good. And I never expected that. Straight up, never expected that. And it just people show their true colors.
I also want to say something about that too.
Oh, well, Brendan not only defends them, but brings them on the show, does a show with them. Like, so it ostracized me from certain comedy clubs. And, I'm like, wait, what? Wait, you're not sending me availables now? I didn't do anything. But you did. You're on that team. We're on this team. I went, okay.
Yeah.
And all that I'd go, okay.
That was less so. Like, there are.
And I wish they had just named some of the comedians that they feel like have turned on them. Like, at this point, why not? And I mean, last year, Ari Shaffir, he criticized Bryan for doing something similar. He didn't say his name, but it's clear who he's talking about. And he said that Bryan didn't stand by Chris D'Elia enough when he got canceled. So some comedians take that stuff seriously, but it's funny Bryan was criticized for that because, I mean, he's one of the handful of people that will still work with Chris, which obviously it's because he's in a similar situation, but I don't know if it really helps him too much because then him and Chris just get lumped together. Like on this podcast, when it gets brought up, Bryan makes sure to remind people and make the distinction that him and Chris got canceled for different things. Like they shouldn't be lumped together.
Can understand why some of them didn't speak up for Bryan and Chris. I get it. I get it because you're scared.
But Bryan and Chris are two different things too.
No, I'm saying that whole cancel thing. It's one thing.
We're all all of us are in our different boats.
But still, you guys were voted off the island. So my thing is, I can understand that some people wouldn't do it because they're scared of it, and then some I don't understand because of course I realize I'd get some blowback, but it's like I don't respect it.
And it doesn't sound like Brendan's really over the comedians that stopped supporting them. It sounds like there's definitely still some resentment there. Like towards the end of the podcast, Brendan just started going off about how Bryan deserves to be in a better position in comedy and comedians need to treat him with more respect because he's still better than 99% of them. Like he was really getting fired up here, which I'll get to in a second. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Raycon. If you're in the market for earbuds, you're in luck because right now is the best time to get a pair of Raycons, since they just launched their new upgraded model of their everyday earbuds that offer new features like multi-point connectivity that lets you pair to 2 devices at once and active noise cancellation. They're also weatherproof and sweat resistant, and they're extremely comfortable. I'm always listening to podcasts and music, and I'll wear these playing basketball or working out, and they fit great and work perfectly. And Raycon sold over 3 million pairs of their previous everyday earbuds, so people really like them. And they also offer a 30-day happiness guarantee, so they're definitely worth checking out. When it comes to earbuds, it's hard to beat the value you get from Raycon. Also, right now, you can get 15% off your purchase plus free shipping if you click the link in the description box below or go to buyraycon.com/toolazy. Again, that's 15% off your Raycon purchase plus free shipping if you use the link below or go to buyraycon.com/toolazy. Yeah, so like I was saying, then Brendan goes on this really emotional rant about how Bryan deserves better in comedy. I think that's basically what he's trying to say here. And it's funny what leads to this. Like, I believe they're answering fan questions, and somebody asked, when have you been the most proud of each other, or something like that. And this is Brendan's response. Like, he just starts going off, and eventually he does loop it around to the question. But it sounds like this is something he's been holding in for a while.
It drives me, but if we're being honest, leave this, Jin. Don't edit this out. I'm speaking from my fucking heart. I know you're not going to like this. I'm going to look right. It drives me fucking nuts that Bryan's at where he's at. I will challenge anyone, any comic, to go on stage after Callen. I challenge any of those comics. I don't give a fuck if it's the Comedy Store, where Zanies, wherever they're at, and you're telling me Bryan's not better than 99% of those fucking comics. It drives me nuts that he's not up there with those guys. He's better than fucking 99% of them. And you want to outcast him over some bullshit? That's what upsets me. So what makes me proud, and not mad, I'm trying to get mad, what makes me proud is he's not going to lash out about it. Bryan's cool. Bryan goes to work. Bryan's doing the road. Bryan's trying to sell tickets.
And I don't think Bryan's even really that upset about his position in comedy. I mean, it seems to be going all right. Like, at least he has a decent career in it. But his acting career, on the other hand, that was pretty much over with right when he got canceled. Like, I don't know if he's done anything since then. I mean, the only thing I can remember seeing him in recently was that Steven Crowder sketch where he's dressed up as a cow and getting whipped by another man for Steven Crowder's pleasure, basically. Like, that's what his acting career has become now. So he definitely paid the price after getting canceled. Like, also just him having to work with Steven Crowder, I'd say that's enough of a punishment right there. And it seems like Bryan just kind of accepted it. Like, I don't know if he still works with Crowder, but it seems like he's kind of just accepted that if he wants to continue his acting career, he needs to just take what he can get and try to pay his dues. I mean, I saw recently, to show off his acting chops and try to get back in the business, he's resorted to performing in Chris D'Elia's living room. But obviously, I'm sure anything for him is a step up from Crowder's studio. And he got to showcase his skills much more with this, especially compared to his role as Steven Crowder's cow. You know, that is pretty one-dimensional, but here he got to go all out. Like, at one point, he pretended to get poisoned.
Okay. Cut it. All right.
That's a
All
point.
right.
That's a point.
That is not good.
That's a point.
Yeah, so that's what they're up to. You know, they're still out there trying to make it happen. But back to the Fighter and the Kid podcast. At one point, they're asked about Bobby Lee and that whole situation and if they've hashed things out at all. And Bryan, he said that him and Bobby are pretty much good now. Like, I don't know if they're friends. I don't know if they ever will be. But it sounds like Bobby accepted Bryan's apology. And Brendan, he said he would want to have Bobby back on the podcast, but he doesn't think it'll ever happen. And also now he claims Bobby and him were never really friends. Like, they never talked that much.
Me and Bobby didn't talk like weekly or even monthly. If I saw him at the store, we're always cool,
yeah.
Which is the truth. I don't talk to Bobby. I didn't talk to him before any of this. So there's no falling out. We were never that close. Yeah.
There's no drama. Like, Bobby Lee is one of my close friends. Me and Bobby talk all. No one's been more supportive when I started than Bobby Lee, dude.
Really? Hopefully Bryan and Bobby are friends.
I hope so.
Me and Bobby never really had a relationship. Like, I'm good, Bobby's good, he's crushing it. You know, hopefully you guys are friends, but I'm good.
Yeah, but what made me feel happy
if Bobby ever wanted to come on, we'd have him on.
Yeah, of course.
To all honesty, I don't think he ever would.
Well,
I just don't think so.
And I think that's probably more accurate. Like, him and Bobby were never that close to begin with. I mean, I know they've done each other's podcasts, and Bobby's had some classic moments on The Fighter and the Kid. But also, I mean, Brendan was hitting on Bobby's girlfriend. So I'd imagine these two probably weren't the closest behind the scenes. And Brendan, he was just kind of saying him and Bobby are best friends just to make it seem like nothing was going on. Like, also, Brendan said that he was much closer to Andrew Santino, who also cut him off after all the Bobby Lee drama, which it sounds like he took much harder.
But either way, they're fine. We're fine. They're killing it. Like, bad friends are killing it. I love Santino to death.
Yeah.
I was way closer with Santino. Me and him don't talk anymore. That bums me out. I was really close to Santino. Love Santino. Love him to death. I was close to Santino. But again, I get it. This whole drama thing, that's your partner? That's like Bryan.
Yeah, so they went over a lot during this podcast. Like, the whole second half of the episode, they're talking about pretty much everything that's happened. Like, Bryan getting canceled, the truck walk, Bobby Lee's situation, and the lawsuit. Like, this is probably the most they've talked about it on their podcast, but they probably wanted to explain why some of these comedians aren't on there anymore. and they're answering fan questions, and they said they're trying to just be honest about everything, which, you know, I'm sure they still were exaggerating and lying about some things, especially with the lawsuit, but I'm not going to really get into that. One thing Brendan was being honest about, though, is peeing in the sink. He finally came clean about that.
Keep your whistle.
And have I peed in the sink? Absolutely.
Yeah. You
Makes
gotta
me
keep
feel
your
like a Hell's
whistle
Angel.
clean. Yep.
Can't stop, won't stop.
That's it. It's your sink.
But yeah, that's about it here. If you guys want more content from me, make sure you check out my Patreon account. If you want to hear about the time Tim Dillon humbled Whitney Cummings, or the degeneracy of Ari Shaffir, or the time Patton Oswalt apologized for taking a picture of Dave Chappelle, or just a ton of other stuff. There are over 80 videos on there. So if you're a fan of the channel, make sure you check it out. I'll put a link in the description.